Family photos depict smiling faces. People take pictures of the happy moments in their lives. No one ever takes a photograph of something they want to forget.
1 Hour Photo sees Robin Williams give his most eerie and complex performance, and it's one that I feel rarely gets talked about when it comes to celebrating his incredibly diverse body of work. I think the reason for this is because it was a role that greatly subverted the public perception most people had of him by taking his lovably iconic and comforting charisma and showing us that hiding behind that innocent smile could be something far more sinister. 1 Hour Photo tells the story of Cy the Photo Guy, a photo technician at a local superstore called Save Mart who harbours a deeply disturbing obsession with one of his best customers, the Yorkin family. Not only does he prioritise their service and give them discounts and free stock without authority to do so, but he frequently stalks their family home, conveniently showing up in places they wouldn't expect to encounter him, and he even makes copies of their photos for himself and arranges them in a haunting collage in his cold, empty apartment. Cy is unquestionably a very troubled man, and it's definitely a film that won't work for everyone as it's a largely minimalistic character study that only vaguely alludes to what is actually wrong with him and why he's so obsessed with this particular family. The film constantly challenges your feelings towards him, as Williams portrays Cy with a timid childhood innocence and naivety that's actually quite indicative of his early work, and further goes to explaining Cy's behaviour as he doesn't seem capable of reading social cues, lacks awareness of his own behaviour, and doesn't understand right from wrong. Well, at least at first. Eventually, as his stalking intensifies, you start to suspect Cy has a more nefarious motive, as he is clearly capable of emotional manipulation to gain the family's trust and respect, as he reads the same books as the mother Nina to engage in personal conversation, and in one scene he steals a toy from the superstore he knows the son Jake really wants. In fact, Cy even encounters the father Will, whom he's never met in person, but because he is so intimately familiar with the Yorkin family photos, Cy treats him like a celebrity he's known for years, becoming starstruck to be in the presence of a man he seemingly envies for his supposedly perfect life.
You're a very lucky man, Mr. Yorkin.
I'm sorry?
On the outset, Cy is basically trying to worm his way into the family's peaceful, picture-perfect existence like a parasite, which, now that I say that, is literally the same metaphor used in Bong Joon-ho's masterful thriller Parasite. Hell, one way to describe 1 Hour Photo is like a bridge between Parasite and Matthew Holness's Possum. One deals with domestic envy and exploitation, while the other is underpinned by this obscure mystery as to who Cy is and the implications your mind creates. After all, his effort to become closer with the family is largely psychological. He's living a life of delusions, false memories, and daydreaming that slowly disconnects him from reality, to the point you can see it inevitably escalating towards something potentially physical or violent. In the opening, Cy is already in custody, and so arguably the film is framed as an unreliable narrative where he presents himself as a lonely, misunderstood man living a repressed and troubled existence, but what he sees as normal is not the same to us. We visually see him as just a creepy, middle-aged weirdo stalking and harassing some random family. To further contextualize the story, 1 Hour Photo was actually one of 2 critically and commercially successful psychological thrillers released in 2002 that Williams starred in as a means to go against his usual typecasting. The other was Christopher Nolan's Insomnia, where Williams played a murderer being hunted by a dirty cop played by Al Pacino. However, for me, 1 Hour Photo will always exist as an extraordinarily compelling anomaly within Williams' extensive filmography, as it capitalized on the parasocial relationships some audiences developed for his persona, especially with his growing association with nostalgia. It's extremely low-key for the most part, but eventually as the plot starts to unravel, we begin to see a side of Williams' acting that will shatter the illusion of the warm-hearted, harmless man he initially portrays Cy to be. Now, broadly speaking, 1 Hour Photo is about how we use photographed memories to visually represent a life that's not necessarily the whole truth. People always say that the camera never lies, but while technically true, humans have a very different perception on how they wish their photos to be interpreted by others. That is, we want them to display only the best and most positive side of our lives because, as Cy himself says, nobody takes photos of things they wish to forget. The point it makes is that just because someone is smiling in a photo doesn't mean they're happy. The only truth to a photo is the exterior because we can't objectively capture and bottle what's genuinely inside us. How the film presents Cy is entirely symbolic of the limits to what a photo can ultimately say. Out of context, we see Cy innocently interacting with the family, but the photography frames him in a different light. There is a fact in what we see, but not in how we choose to perceive it based on what we know and believe. I know this all sounds so obvious, yet what's really interesting is that the film has aged incredibly well because it takes on an even more harrowing social relevance today. The film actually predated the surge of social media, as MySpace did not arrive until the following year, and the most popular platforms we use today weren't even a possibility yet because smartphones didn't exist. However, its most haunting idea was how it highlighted how normalized it became to surrender our privacy to obtain physical relics of cherished memories and experiences to share with others. We always talk about how we put our entire lives online these days, but that dangerous mentality was long conditioned before social media was a dominant influence. Back in the day, and fuck that makes me feel old, you would just hand off your film roll to some stranger to develop and didn't give a second thought to the fact that they saw everything you photographed, especially the dodgy stuff or doxable information you didn't realize you captured. And to put that in perspective, that's exactly how Cy learns everything about this family and every customer he has. To them, he's a total stranger, but to him, he knows frighteningly more about them than they could ever imagine. But let's get into where things take a truly confrontational turn. So, I'm guessing most of you are still caught up on the whole eye bleeding thing. Well, let me explain. 1 Hour Photo is written and directed by commercial and music video director Mark Romanek, who gives the story a distinct eerie visual style that's indicative of photography development. The point of it is to show how Cy's life is consumed by an inescapable trauma that's related to photography, and to suppress the pain, he hunts for a happy purpose within that very trauma, which just so happens to be the seemingly perfect lives of the Yorkin family. However, looks can be deceiving, as eventually Cy discovers that this isn't the happy family he thinks it is, as Will is having an affair with another customer of Cy's. Soon after, Cy gets fired by his boss, played by Gary Cole, who basically reprises a similar version of his character from Office Space, and sets off on a quest to expose Will's infidelity to Nina. Now, things are naturally much more complicated than that, and do not play out anywhere close to what you think will happen. It adds a significantly disturbing level of unpredictability, as going back to the thematic point of the story, you simply cannot see what's in Cy's head despite the outward visual implications. At first, Cy steals Rambo's knife and takes threatening photos of his now ex-boss's daughter, leading to investigators pursuing Cy as he unsuccessfully gets Nina to confront Will after planting his adulterating photos in his son's photo collection. Sai's initial plan goes immediately out the window, ironically making him question what the hell is actually wrong with this family. Instead, while keeping within YouTube's fleeting reference guidelines, Sai confronts Will and his secret partner at a hotel and forces them to take humiliating and explicit photographs before being arrested by the cops after a meta chase scene where Sai delusionally looks like he's making a heroic escape. So what exactly is the point of this? Well, when speaking to the detective, Sai alludes to his childhood and how his father used him for what I'm sure you can piece together at this point. Sai's newfound obsession with confronting Will comes from his need to punish him for being a bad father, by making Will experience a relatively similar psychological pain to Sai, who experienced the worst monster in his own life and doesn't want the rest of the Yorkin family to suffer as a result. Sai clearly does not enjoy any of this, but underneath his tears is a man channeling his own wicked father by exerting control and dominance and reliving his own childhood. In fact, you could say Sai's entire underlying behaviour until he physically acts upon it is about exerting a feeling of control he doesn't have in his own life. When confronted by his boss earlier in the film, he's torn apart for treating the 1 hour photo stall as his own domain and viewing Save Mark customers as his customers, and then going off to shadow over the lives of a family who are ultimately inconsequential. 1 hour photo is a terrific yet deeply frightening look at perception and how we make judgments from simple appearances when we can never know the absolute truth behind anyone. What further compounds the complexity is that the photos Sai takes aren't actually of Will and his partner, they're just mundane objects, leaving his confrontation ambiguous. In my perspective, it goes back to Sai's philosophy that he doesn't want to take photos of something he would rather forget, with the Shining-esque ending photo of Sai with the Yorkins happy and at peace, showing that Sai would rather continue living in his delusions rather than face the reality of his shattered existence.